Okay, hello. Hi, everybody. Hey. There we go. Thank you. We'll begin with our chalice lighting.
May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always.
I'd like to invite you to open your hearts to meeting with one another with these words by John Burens. Blessed are those who support the church and its work by their regular, sustained, and generous giving, and give of themselves no less than their money. Blessed are those who know that the church is often imperfect, yet rather than harbor feelings of anger or disappointment, bring their concerns and needs to the attention of the church leaders. Blessed are those who, when asked to serve, do it gladly, who realize that change is brought about through human meetings, and who do the work of committees and stay to the end. Blessed are you all.
And we hope the end won't be too long. And I'll remind you that we don't allow food during these proceedings, but water and milk will be fine. My name is Hal Potts. I'm the president of this congregation, and our first order of business is to determine that we have a quorum, as required by our bylaws, is 70 voting members. And to be a voting member, you have to have been a member for 90 days or longer. So, do I have my counters here? This should not take very long. If you qualify as a voting member for longer than 90 days, please raise your hand. We good? Great. Thank you. So we have a quorum, and the meeting is officially called to order. Also, our bylaws require that we give a 10-day notice in advance of every meeting, and we have met that requirement. I'd like to thank you all for being here today for a mid-year update at our congregational meeting, and I'm really especially excited to hear from our big three task forces, which is kind of my mission this year, and that is, of course, our building for our future task force to look into our new building plans, our developmental minister task force for our new minister beginning in July, and our governance task force, which is looking at the way that we run the church and how we could update our current system into something that might serve us a little bit better. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the June 2019 meeting. These minutes have been posted on the website. They're also in your packet today. Are there any questions about those minutes? And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve. And a second? We have a motion and a second. Those in favor of approving the minutes as stated? Anyone opposed? Thank you. It's unanimous. I'd like to take 1 second just to recognize our hardworking board members here. As I call your name, if you'd please stand so that you can be recognized by the congregation. Our Vice President, Doug Pasto Crosby. Our Secretary, Melinda Fish. Our Treasurer, Steve Jones. Program Council Chair, Rachel Rogers. Resource and Development Chair, Allison Thompson. Ministerial Council Chair, Chelsea Henry. Operations Council Chair, Dan Hiller. At-large members, Steve Haruk, Scott Weaver, Phyllis Salter, and Sharon Reese. And our ex officio past president, Kim Hackett. I know Kim's here. There we go. Thank you, guys. Our first order of business is the Worship Committee ordination, and that's Rachel Rogers.
Good morning. As he said, my name is Rachel Rogers, and I'm up here now representing the Worship Committee, and I will present, we have a motion we'd like to present for the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville to ordain Mary Early-Zold into Unitarian Universalist ministry. Before I read that motion, I do have a statement from Mary that I would like to read. I have been privileged to be a member of the Fund community since the summer of 2001, 1 year after I moved here with my husband and daughter from Minneapolis, where I had worked as a clinical psychologist. After a Catholic childhood and years of unchurched secular humanism, I found a spiritual home where I felt valued as I was and held accountable to the ethics I wanted to uphold. Over the years, my theology grew and Fund changed me fundamentally, calling me into ministry, into who I truly was. After 12 years of very active membership, I worked as your Sunday membership coordinator and then answered that call to ministry in 2014. I studied and earned my Master's of Divinity from Vanderbilt Divinity School, serving here for my advanced field education. Although I entered Vanderbilt Divinity School envisioning a future as a church pastor, I clarified my call to urban chaplaincy with marginalized youth people. I served as a student chaplain at St. Thomas West Hospital and completed my internship at Greater Nashville Unitarian Universalist Church and Nashville Launchpad. I seek ordination from the Unitarian Universalist Association and envisioning my future as a community minister, providing chaplaincy and supplying pulpits with worship as needed. I hold a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Minnesota, a Master's of Divinity from Vanderbilt University, and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Nebraska. I appreciate your support and am honored to be considered for ordination. Again, that was a statement from Mary Early-Zold. So we present the motion as follows. Whereas Unitarian Universalist congregations have the sole power to ordain UU clergy, and whereas First UU member Mary Early-Zold has completed all of the requirements and is pending preliminary fellowship with the UUA in March, the Worship Committee moves that the congregation ordain Mary Early-Zold in May 2020, exact date to be determined.
Thank you, Rachel. This is one of the most exciting things that we do in this church to me is to grow new ministers and send them out into the world. And if you've been here long enough, you can see what amazing effects that has. And to think that it all started here, like the current president of the UUA I was on her intern committee when she was an intern. That's exciting stuff. So we have a motion, I'll read it again. Whereas the UU congregations have the sole power to ordain UU clergy, and whereas First UU member Mary Early-Zold has completed all of the requirements and is in preliminary fellowship with the UUA, the Worship Committee moves that the congregation ordain Mary Early-Zold in May 2020, exact date to be determined. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you. Let's vote. Those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. I'm not surprised. Our next speaker is Steve Jones, our treasurer.
I'm Allison Thompson. I'm the R&D chair. And Steve Jones, our treasurer, is going to make this.
I'm Steve Jones. I'm your treasurer. Hal said I had to say something. So I'm going to say we're in the black. That's why I'm wearing black. Lots of changes have happened, and I've tried to outline most of them and summarize them in my report, so I hope you'll read that, so I won't have to read to you. I will make a correction to the report. In my report, I say bottom line income exceeds expense by about $28,000. That's actually like $41,000 as of today. So we are doing well. Don't expect that to happen toward the end of the fiscal year. This is pretty typical. We have more of our pledges coming in the first 6 months of the fiscal year than we do in the last 6 months. A lot of people have already paid their pledge. So we can expect cash flow to go back down. And as you recall, last year, toward the end of the year, we had to borrow $19,000 from our reserves just to make payroll and to pay bills. We paid back that $19,000 already because cash flow has been good this year. Our pledges are on budget. Everything's on budget except the things that we honestly told you last year probably wouldn't be on budget, but we budgeted it anyway, and that's non-pledge offerings and service fees. Those are way under budget, and in our next budget, we're going to probably try to be more realistic there. Expenses are way below. Again, that's going to change toward the end of the year. Lots of committees don't spend their money until toward the end. They all of a sudden realize they have budget money and they can spend it. So, hey, spend it. So, we have two things. Finance Committee has two things that we would like for you to vote on. First is motion to authorize the treasurer or me to write off loans to the operating reserves and adjust our operating reserve balance to a true balance. So first you would ask, why are we asking you to vote on that? Okay, the reason is because you voted to do it. So you have to vote to undo it. Why should we undo it? What we have on our books is an operating reserve balance of $38,000, which consists of $24,000 in cash and an IOU of $14,000. Okay, we don't have a budget item to pay back the $14,000. So whenever we look at our balance sheet, we're always looking at an incorrect balance for our true reserves. So what we're asking you to do is basically say that IOU, just wipe it off. We don't have a payable and a receivable of $14,000 to ourselves. Instead, we just have really $24,000 in operating reserves. That doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying to put money in operating reserves. I mean, when we have money, we're going to move it there. But we don't have money right now to make payments on that loan, so what's the point? So what I'm really asking you to do is to make our books look like they have show the actual number that we have in reserves. So the motion from the Finance Committee is to authorize the treasurer to write off loans to the operating reserves and adjust our operating reserve balance to a true balance. And I guess I need a second, right? Okay, so any questions? Bob?
I don't have a question, I just have an explanation. These loans were put on the books in before 2010, 2011, where we used money to put on a roof or make a parking lot or whatever, pave the parking lot. And at the congregational meeting, when we voted to redo the social area and expand the sanctuary, we put it to a vote of whether to keep these loans or write them off. And at that time, everybody wanted to keep the loans. I didn't understand it, but the people spoke. So that's where this all came from, just in case you're wondering how this got there in the first place. And in my opinion, it was crazy then and it's crazy now to have these loans that are just to ourselves from our operating reserve. It doesn't make sense. So I'm in favor of this motion.
Al, you gonna? I got another motion after this. So
All right, so our motion is to authorize the treasurer to write off loans to the operating reserves and adjust our operating reserve balance to a true balance. We have a motion, and do we have a second? Got a second? Those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have more. We have a mortgage, and it's not much. It's about $112,000, and we're paying $32.45 a month on our mortgage. If you recall, last year in our budget, we had to cut our UUA dues from like $22,000 to $12,000. Our fair share is $39,000, so we're not even close to our fair share. We're like a fourth of our fair share. We would like to be able to have some additional cash to be able to use to pay our UUA dues fairly and, basically to augment our budget. We've talked to our bank, which is Synovus, and they indicate that we can refinance our mortgage over 15 years. So we'd have a 15-year amortization, and with the caveat that there's a balloon payment in 5 years, okay? So it's amortized as if we're paying over 15 years, which makes the payment really low, but in 5 years, we got to pay it off or refinance it again. If things go the way we plan, in 5 years, we're going to be financing a new building. So that's probably going to happen before then. So our thinking is, why not pay the least amount we can pay on our mortgage now, lower our payment, and use that money for either our UUI dues or for things that we need to do in church. We can lower our payment to like $1,200 a month. That saves us over $2,000. And not only can we refinance our mortgage, but we can take some cash back. And we can use that cash to augment our capital reserves and perhaps our operating reserves. So the Finance Committee reviewed this. We think it's a good idea. And so we're bringing to you a motion to authorize the Board of Directors to refinance the current mortgage balance, plus some additional funds for capital improvements at current interest rates. I don't know what that'll be, probably 5%, using a 15-year amortization with a 5-year balloon payment, such that our monthly payment is lowered to approximately $1,200. So in other words, what we're going to do is we're going to try to set the amount we borrow to match that payment. And it'll depend on the interest rate. It'll depend on a lot of things when we do it. But we need because the bylaws require you guys to approve a loan of that size, we need for you guys to approve it. So Finance Committee makes the motion, and has anybody got questions?
Could you tell us the remaining term of this mortgage?
The mortgage will be paid in 2023.
Would you clarify what a balloon payment is?
And then you got to pay it off. You don't get to make payments anymore after 5 years.
Okay.
So you're paying a lower payment as if you were going to pay it in 15 years, but when you get to the 5th year, you got to pay the balance.
Could you explain the amount of the cash back and why would that be adding to our mortgage amount?
We would be adding dollars to our amount to place in capital reserves to use to spend on fixing up some things that really need to be fixed up right now. Lighting is one, carpet, sound system. There's lots of things we need to do around the church that we would be basically rolling into that loan. Anything else, we would probably put in operating reserves. Just keep in mind that as we have a capital campaign over the next, our plan is to have a capital campaign, not this stewardship drive, but next stewardship drive. That once you have a capital campaign, your pledge drives annually tend to be flat. because, everybody's coughed up money for the capital campaign. So when you go to them and say, hey, we need an extra 5% this year, probably not going to get it. So we're going to need to build up our operating reserves to be able to make up for increases that will definitely happen as we go from year to year. There'll be increases in staff salaries, and so there's going to be additional money needed each year. So we would like to build up our reserves to be able to pay that. So part of what we're doing is we're sort of leveraging our property to pull some cash out of it and use it for those reserves.
So can you say what the interest rate that we're currently paying is and what the new interest rate would be?
We're paying about 3.875
now. And what would we get with this refinance?
The last time we talked to the bank, it was approximately 5.
So we're going to be paying more interest. When we get that extra money, are there plans for investment? What kind of return do we think? I'm just worried about this 5 years down the road when we've got two different things coming down the road that are going to be a lot of money.
That money would probably stay in our money market account. We don't invest our reserves. They're in money market. We don't want to lose the principal.
Why is it more advantageous to do the 15-year loan as opposed to paying it off in 2 years?
If we pay it off in 2 years, we're going to be paying $3,200, $3,245 a month. And then we're done. And then we're done. But in the meantime, we haven't paid our UUA dues for 2 to 3 years.
So it frees up cash flow.
It frees up cash flow, bottom line.
$2,000 a month plus.
Yes.
Is there a way to borrow the money that we need from somebody else? That's
I'm sorry, to borrow from someone else other than the bank?
Can we do a separate drive to get that money that we need to pay the UU?
That's certainly an option. The motion doesn't specify that we borrow the money from a bank, just specifies that you're authorizing the board to refinance the mortgage.
Maybe I'm not understanding something, but I'm concerned that it sounds like it's short-term gain for long-term pain, because we're going to have to pay it back, and we're going to be trying to finance a new building kind of simultaneously. Or am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything. I note that our mortgage is pretty low. I mean, $112,000 is, not much. If somebody wants to pony up and pay $112,000, we will pay zero next year.
Steve, I think shopping for money is like shopping for a car. If we're going to pay it off, which I think is not a bad idea, we should talk to several other banks and lend.
We did talk to a couple of banks, but quite honestly, I'll be very frank with you, we don't have enough people on the finance committee to do all that legwork.
Okay.
So we have a good relationship with our bank.
I understand.
We did talk to 2 other banks already. We're not going to see much difference in the interest rate.
Well, I know residential rates are lower than 5 right now.
It's all different for a bank, for a church.
Yeah,
there's limits on what we can borrow.
Yeah.
There's actually limit if we actually take cash. If we borrow more than our mortgage, there's limits on what we can do with the cash.
Yeah, and I assume that one way we're going to pay off this balloon is to roll it into the new capital fund drive, right?
Most likely, yes.
Yeah, okay.
As opposed to a question, the comment, it seems like we're talking about authorizing a larger amount of loan for a longer period of time at a higher interest rate. So we're going from currently paying it off in 3 years to paying it off in 5, borrowing more money than we currently owe at a higher interest rate than we currently are paying. And I would rather continue to have, my opinion is we'd be better off to continue paying the higher monthly payment now to have the zero balance mortgage sooner.
the anticipated expenses in building or doing whatever needs to be done in the future. You've raised 2 or 3 needs specifically now. Have you or somebody investigated just exactly what needs to be done to the current facilities? And is it really worth putting in much money into those facilities, our current ones?
It was recommended to us by our stewardship consultant, Barry Finkelstein, that we continue to keep this building up. And that was important to keep members coming, to grow the church. There's some things that have to be done in this church. I mean, there are things that won't wait 4 years or 5 years.
If you get to the 5-year mark down the road and you are not able to make the balloon payment, what's the penalty?
Well, you just refinance it. Oh. And the downside to that would be some closing costs.
I'd like to clarify one thing. John, the current balance on the mortgage is a little over $100,000, but the payments are based on a $300,000 original amount. And if we're refinancing now, we would refinance the current balance of a little over $100,000 plus some number, $20,000 or $50,000. So we would be paying on a lower total balance than we currently are now. And the loan payment amount is based on a lower amount. The current payment is $32.45 based on 300 and something that we borrowed several years ago.
7 years ago, I think it was.
So, and whatever we do today, we're going to have to we're going to have a new loan when we build our building, because Barry Finkelstein pointed out that church buildings are financed in exactly the opposite way of homes. Homes, you put 20% down, you borrow 80%, roughly. Churches, you put 80% down, you borrow 20. So, I mean, that's what Barry said. That's just the way that works. So we're trying to free up some cash now to pay a reasonable amount for our UUA dues. We slashed it from $22,000 2 years ago to $12,000 this year. That's just not fitting. And freeing up the cash flow helps that. It doesn't really make any difference in the long run, because we're going to have to refinance even if we were keeping the existing loan, we'd probably be refinancing within the time frame of paying it off, before the final payment is due, if things proceed as we expect with the building process. And if it doesn't, then we just refinance it again. There's no problem with having to refinance it at the end of 5 years. That's just not a big deal.
If we do a 5-year loan, we won't be able to have a low payment. So there's not, honestly, if we do a 5-year loan, we'd be better off not refinancing. Well, we're not paying as much interest, but over the life of the loan, we will probably pay a little bit more interest than we're paying now. One, because we're paying a higher percent, and also because we're paying it for an additional few years.
So, Steve, how much is the balloon in 5 years?
It depends on how much we borrow and what I'd have to run an amortization schedule to be able to tell you what that'd be. So, I mean, if we just borrowed $112,000 and we paid the $1,200 say a month, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm guessing we'd probably be $80,000. I don't know. That's just pulling out of my head.
I'd like to call the question.
There's no second for call the question. Oh. No, I'm just saying you didn't need one.
The motion is to
You got to vote on the call the question first.
Okay. Those in favor of calling the question at this time? Opposed?
What does that mean?
It means we're no further discussion.
Yeah, we're stopping the discussion and moving on.
Vote.
Okay. That was 2/3. The motion is to authorize the Board of Directors to refinance our current mortgage balance plus additional funds for capital improvements at current interest rates using a 15-year amortization with a 5-year balloon payment such that our monthly payment is lowered to approximately $1,200. Do I have a second on that motion? I have a second? Let's vote. Those in favor of the motion? Those opposed?
Keep hands up. There was a few.
5, 6 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of? Thanks.
Thank you, Steve and Allison. Thank you. Our next item is the nominating committee report and vote. Susan Warner could not be here today, so Chaz Sisk will be speaking. There he is.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you to Steve Jones and people like Allison Thompson. There's just, I know as a member of the nominating committee, these are often some of the hardest positions in the church to fill, the finance positions. It requires a lot of knowledge, and it's often very difficult decisions that have to be made, and we appreciate their service. And if you feel called to be the church treasurer next year, we will be, you should let us know, and we will be happy to entertain that as a possibility. As Hal mentioned, Susan couldn't be here today. Susan Warner is our chair. I'm Chaz Sisk. I'm a member of the nominating committee. The other members are Pat Lynch, Carol Koppel, Kathy Hiller, and Valerie Martin. We have 3 items or 3 nominations that we would like you all to vote on today. The first is Gaines Mann for the Endowment Trust. The second is Chris Martin for the Safe Congregation panel. And the third is Kim Hackett to join us on the nominating committee, giving us our full 7 people. So that's our only matter of business. I guess, should I make the motion or can? Well, yeah, I guess while I'm up here, and I was going to do this after the vote, but we do have, as I said, an opening for board treasurer next year, we believe, and also we have 2 openings on the nominating committee for next year, including my position, so I'll be term limited out. So we encourage you to join us on the nominating committee if that's something you feel called to do. You should know there's over 200 members and friends in our congregation who serve as volunteers in some capacity, and I think many of you in this room are doing that. Yeah, and we thank all of you for all your service, and you know, it is a lot. Takes a lot to run a church, though. So, if there are additional things you can do or new things that you'd like to do, you should always reach out to us and let us know, and we're happy to entertain that. So, going back to the nominations again, that was Gaines Mann for Endowment Trust, Chris Martin for Safe Congregation panel, and Kim Hackett for the nominating committee. And can I make the motion, or should? Okay, yeah, and I would like to make a motion for the congregation to approve those nominations. Okay, great. Is there a question?
Well, I'd like to, if it's not already done.
Can we wait for the microphone, please?
For the camera. Just wait here, you move the camera.
If it's not already done in your motion, I'd just like to make the motion that we approve or disapprove all 3 at the same time.
Oh, yes, I think we can do that all at once, yes. Any other discussion? All right, I guess, can I call for the vote? Yeah. If we'd like to take a vote, please, then I would love to see it. All in favor? Okay. All opposed? All right, appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chaz. Nominating is a pretty tricky job, and it takes a lot of work, so I want to extend my thanks to everybody that works on the nominating committee.
So, I'm not sure I see all these people. I see Kim. Is Chris here? Is Gaines here? There's Gaines. Okay. So, we're going to do this responsive reading that says installation, because together as a congregation, we always install our elected leaders. It's right after, on the back of the page of the nominating committee. I will read the first section. You'll be reading the stuff in heavier type. Then there's a part for the whole congregation, and then elected leaders. So that's Gaines and Kim right here. Congregation, elected leaders. Okay? You ready, Gaines? You got it? Great. Okay. Religious leadership knows the abiding presence of a sustaining and transforming love at the heart of life.
It testifies that this love is beyond all names, undergirds joy, asks for justice, disturbs the status quo, and is freedom.
Religious leaders point to the grace at work in life, especially in places of suffering and places of creativity.
They speak and act prophetically, pointing us in reverence towards what we hold sacred.
They lead congregations and communities to be active witnesses to the world, to the abiding presence of love.
Do you, the members of the Nominations Committee, Endowment Trust, and Safe Congregation Panel, who we elected to be the leaders of our church, promise to fulfill the responsibilities of your position with a sense of trustworthiness, graciousness, dependability, humor, and love? Therefore, we bestow upon you the authority to act on our behalf by installing you as the elected lay leaders of our church during this new year.
We accept the responsibility to our position and will live to provide necessary
leadership to ensure that the First UU Church of Nashville continues to be both a haven and beacon of our Unitarian Universalist faith.
Blessed be. And I must say, our nomination committee, we don't just have 200 people volunteering. We have people who really do live by these values, and we are blessed. Thank you.
So now we're going to hear from our three task forces, the first being the Developmental Minister Task Force, with an update on what's going on there. I would like to tell you who is on that task force. Daryl Meyer is the chair. Gail Sfar will be speaking here in a moment. David Dickinson, Vicki Tatarin, Colin Garrett, and Chelsea Henry is the board liaison. So, Gail?
Good afternoon. On June 9th, 2019, at our annual meeting, the lead minister transition team recommended that First UU hire a developmental minister to begin work August 1st. Now, I think Hal mentioned July 1st, but it's going to be August 1st. And this recommendation was overwhelmingly approved by this congregation. Hal already mentioned the 5 people that were then appointed by the board to serve on the committee, and I would like to go ahead and have them stand so you know who they are. Darielle Mayer, she's our chair. David Dickinson, Colin Garrett, myself, Gail Sfar, Vicki Tatarin could not be here. And then Chelsea Henry is our board liaison. So these are the folks that if you have questions, please see one of them about the process. Now specifically, the the search team was asked to look for someone who will guide the congregation as we work together to attain 3 specific goals. And they've already been mentioned: guide the new building process and capital campaign, work with the board on governance changes, and revisit and reshape the church mission, vision, and strategic plan. Those are not small goals, and they are not something that's going to be accomplished in a short period of time. So far, the search team, which began its work in September, has done the following. First of all, we identified the strengths that are required or at least desired for the position to come in here to do that. And it's a specific set of skills to do those 3 things. We've also identified our own congregation's strengths and our growing edges that will impact the position and this individual's ability to help us through the process. And finally, we completed and have submitted a very extensive profile of our congregation, over 100 different items that we had to respond to, research and respond to. Things like our history, our operation and finances, our staffing, our culture, all of our different programs, and all of our expectations and hopes for the next few years for this individual. That was the bulk of our work, to be very honest with you, but we have finished it, and we have submitted it. Now, the timeline for this search process is as follows. January 31st, which is this week, one day this week, Friday? Is that what you said? The profile goes live on the UUA website, and it will then be visible to anyone who is considering applying for the position. In early February, we expect to get our first applications, and we will begin reviewing them, matching the qualifications of that person against the what we have already decided we think that we're going to need to get the job accomplished. We will begin interviewing mid-February, early March, depending on the number and the timing of people who can be available for the interviews. Late March, the task force expects to make a recommendation to the board for the hire. In early April, then, the board will make the offer of employment to the successful candidate. And then on August 1st, that person will join us here as our developmental minister. We have been extremely fortunate in this process that we have had wonderful support from the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and their transitions office. They have been with us every step of the way and have been quite accommodating in the things when we have questions. It seems sometimes the repeat questions, and they're very patient with us and have guided us through the whole process. I will also tell you that their assessment of our application to get a developmental minister was excellent. As the person that we've been working with said, she says, your application has lots of minister bait in it. And we were delighted to hear that. So we are expecting to get some good candidates for the position, and we're looking forward to interviewing and to being able to hear some people's sermons and to get their philosophies and do all those kinds of things that we want to do. Now, it's important that you understand this, and this is as it was outlined to us last year and that we voted on. This is a hired position. It is not a called minister. All right. That difference means that the board will be doing the hire. It is not one that the congregation votes on. Okay? It is a year-by-year contract, but we anticipate that the size of the job that we have for this person, it's going to take probably on average about 5 years is what it usually takes. We're saying 3 to 5 years, but probably I would be surprised if we were ready to turn this person loose before 4 or 5 years at least. The search task force members are available to answer any questions you might have about the process itself, and we have also scheduled a question and answer period between services on February the 9th. It'll be in the Thoreau Room. Bring any questions you might have and meet with us then. Do I have any questions?
Mine is a two-part thing. First of all, for those of you who are fairly new to this church, we're looking for a developmental minister because our minister is retiring. And that wasn't a point that was made. We're not kicking her out. She chose to retire. Secondly, I'm wondering, is there a big pool of people in that we can draw from?
We got some numbers from the transition office, and there are 60, I believe, was the number of ministers who are looking to be in transition. Now, not all of them are going to be interested in a developmental slot that's for a restricted time period, but a lot of them are. And again, there are people who will be looking at both. And as with the minister bait that we're offering, we do feel like we're going to have a large enough pool to get a good selection from.
That's the 60 looking, what is about the number of congregations who are looking?
I'm sorry, say that again, Gail.
We have 60 ministers who are in the search. About how many congregations are in the search?
I think that was, something around in the 30s.
So this is, it's a good hire year.
Any other questions? Susan?
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't hear all this, but I thought we were hiring someone who was specifically trained as a developmental minister.
This is a person who will have had experience in the goals, in achieving the kinds of goals that we are looking to accomplish. There is not a specific developmental minister training program as such, but we will be able to select based on their own experience in doing the kinds of things that we need done.
Since it's a 1 year at a time contract, but our aspirations are that we need the person for 5 years, it will be put out that we hope that they will be wanting to stay 5 years so that we don't get somebody who's wanting to transition into something else.
Absolutely. I mean, and that will be that is part of our initial package that we have put out there. And this is what developmental ministers expect. Okay, 3 to 5 years, actually 5 to 7 is more likely what it ends up being. I think Warren had a question here.
Can you give a couple examples of ministerial bait?
Oh, the good state that we are in, the fact that we have got a fairly healthy culture, we're doing well with that. We have a number of very good programs going. We have a competitive salary. We've got to pay attention to that, but we do, and we have the benefits and so forth. It's a combination of the environment that we're in, this congregation, and the work that we have done ourselves in being such a shared ministry congregation. All of those things make it very appealing. Thanks for that's a good question, Warren.
You're hearing from the eternal pessimist over here. And so will you have criteria that you're also evaluating this minister by each year so that we don't just, as is possible with a new hire, get the wrong person and then have no alternative?
Yeah, and that will not be the job of the search committee. That will be the job of a ministerial committee. But yes, certainly.
Again, would this person be eligible to apply for the permanent job?
There is no strict prohibition against it. But I will tell you that the people who have a lot more experience in this than I do and than most of us do strongly recommend against it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Is there, but who will make that? There's not a UUA prohibition, I assume.
No.
So who would make that decision?
Well, we would be, again, we would be working with their transition office in all of this, and we would certainly look to them for some advice on that, but the decision would be, basically, it's ours.
It'd be the board.
Yes.
And not
well, no. Yeah. It's
well, I guess the permanent call has to be made by the congregation.
That's right.
Okay, that answers.
The call is by the congregation.
One more question. There's one back there, Jay.
Will the developmental minister have any part in selecting the future permanent minister?
No, not at all. We hope they will just make the way smoother for that person to come in, Jack. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. And if you have other questions, I would encourage you to come to the question and answer session, which is February 9th. February 9th. You may or may not have heard, but we're thinking about a new building. And to that end, we have our Building Our Future Task Force, which is chaired by Mike Bowles. It also, the other members are Chris Cotton, Jacob Hathaway, Rob Connor, Chaz Sisk, Vicki Tatarin, Phyllis Salter, Paul Gurman, and Denise Gouch, I'm sorry. Mike, where's Mike? There we go. Mike Bowles.
Well, the last you heard about this was the Next Steps weekend that we had back in, I guess, October, when our consultant, Barry Finkelstein, came down to look at us and get to know us and tell us whether he thought we were ready for a capital campaign, and because that will be needed if we're going to build a new building. Surprisingly enough, the capital campaign consultant who we would hire to help us with this feels like we're ready for it. But he actually had some good reasons, and he sent us a report that listed a lot of strengths in this congregation that supported that conclusion. A couple of challenges we face, but things that really are not going to be that difficult, I don't think, to deal with. And suggested that we could hope to raise on the order of 3 to 5 times our annual budget during a capital campaign, which is encouraging and would be on the order of $1.8 to $3 million, a lot of money. So the next step for us on the Building for Our Future task force is to start finding architects and start coming up with plans to look at. To that end, we have sent out letters of invitation to 13 architectural firms, encouraging them to come to a site visit next week here on campus and to submit letters of interest and qualification for us to review. So far, we have 5 positive responses. So there will be interest in the architectural community in helping us. We will review these qualifications on the task force and come to a decision about which firm is the one that we feel most comfortable working with. We will then enter into negotiations with that firm to come up with an initial contract for them to make a schematic design or designs for some kind of facility to replace our current aging structures. These facilities are difficult to access for handicapped individuals. They're difficult to maintain and manage. They're dispersed over our fairly large campus. And maybe most importantly, they're not really efficiently designed to meet our current needs. So those are all some of the reasons to be moving in this direction. We here in the sanctuary are fortunate to profit from the courage and hard work and perseverance of our church forebears who 59 years ago started construction on this sanctuary. And it has served us well over the years since. I'm sure that at that time, they were probably worried about where the money would come from and worried about whether there would be people sitting in the pews when it was all finished and paying to support it. But they were not deterred by that, and here we all are today. And as I say, this facility has served us well. Unfortunately, like me, it's getting a little old and debilitated, and nothing lasts forever. We need to move forward, and we're looking at this process of coming up with schematic diagrams of a new facility, which we will look at on the task force and then share with the congregation. And the congregation will hopefully reach a consensus on what plan looks like the right one. At that point, we will be ready to move ahead with a capital campaign, which we hope will take place in the spring of 2021. So we have that to look forward to. I'm excited about this process and about doing this. I think it's our generation's turn to take on our shoulders the job of creating a new facility that will carry us through the 21st century. So I look forward to talking to you more as new information is available and as these plans become available, and we can look forward to that. Does anyone have questions they want to bring up? Okay, thank you. Oh, there's one.
Is the person who did the massing plan for us one of those who has expressed interest?
That would be Tom Bauer of Bauer and Askew, and I actually called him before we sent out the letter and said, we're sending this letter out to ask for participants. This does not mean we were unhappy with your work on the massing plan. We were very happy with it, and we hope you will participate. I got his voicemail, of course. He called me back within hours and said, oh yes, I'm quite interested and I will be there. We also got a response from the young architect, David Plummer, who came up with plans for a social facility which was going to sit adjacent to this sanctuary that we came up with back in 2001. We weren't able to afford that based on the results of the capital campaign done at that time, but it was a beautiful facility, and he is still interested in us. And so he will also be there. And then there are several other firms that are participating. So we've got a lot of interest.
I want to thank you for your hard work in the committees. And I'm just asking if any of the firms who responded have a record with green building or new age type architecture.
I think that varies from firm to firm. I think what I've been told is that energy efficiency and features like that are now pretty much standard in new buildings. Everyone wants that. We certainly want it. We're going to make that very clear to whatever firm we work with. And that becomes more important every day, clearly. So we hope to make that a big part of our plans. LEED certification is sort of de rigueur at this point. I mean, that's something that gets included in nearly all new buildings, but we may be able to go beyond that. Of course, the more you ask for, the more you pay. So there are trade-offs in every aspect of this.
So we're starting an annual giving campaign, I believe, coming up, and what you're saying is that the amount of money we anticipate to raise to build new buildings and invest in more green buildings is going to be determined by the amount of money that folks are giving as part of their annual giving this year. And so I just wanted to, for folks that are eager to see us invest more of our money in green buildings, think about that when you're thinking about how much you can give next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about giving here shortly as well. The third task force that we have formed this year and is underway is the Governance Task Force. And the members of the Governance Task Force are Sharon Rees, who is the board liaison, Jessica Himmelreich is the chair, Jessica Moore-Lucas is on the committee, Pat Lynch, Jason Plummer, and Margaret Mills is the staff liaison. Sharon?
I have to get this stool out so I can see you guys. Wow, we are looking at getting a new minister, a developmental minister. We're talking about a capital campaign. We're talking about new buildings. Many of us on the board and in leadership thought, wow, isn't this the perfect time to also go ahead and change our governance? So as you can imagine, we're all very busy. I wanted to talk a little bit, this is the Governance Task Force. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing and why, and a little bit about where we were going. You have in your packet here, I'm sorry, not your board packet, your meeting packet, our charge and a timeline for the first year, and I don't want to read it over again. So I want to make sure that I am cognizant of your time. But as we've noticed that as our church has been growing, the facilities that we have not been working as well for us as they used to, and we need to grow along with that. Just as the actual physical facilities have not quite been meeting our needs, we're finding that our governance structure, as we get larger, is also not quite meeting our needs. As I'm looking at everybody out here, I can't think of a single one of you that doesn't volunteer or sit on a committee or do other sorts of things, and I'm sure that every single one of you knows that we have a ton of committees. People are working really, really hard. We don't have as many volunteers as we would love to have in order to get the work done. And some of that problem, after we have been studying, and we talked to Dawn Cooley from, is she from the UUA Southern District? She met with us, with the board, and talked, maybe some of that problem is the fact that is our structure and our governance structure. And there are ways as we get larger that we can change our governance structure and the way we do things that will hopefully be more efficient, that will free up, for example, the board to, instead of looking at all the details and reading reports and making decisions about things that we don't need to make decisions about, that the board could perhaps better spend their time looking at strategies and visions and policies and where we want to be, instead of looking at the minutia of what we're doing right now. Let's have the opportunity to be visionary and look at where we want to be. And if we can do something like that, then the folks who are the volunteers, the staff, including unpaid staff, folks like Steve, who spends hours and hours working on our finance stuff, that those people would have freedom to be able to make decisions without having to necessarily run back to the board. We can say, here's what our goals are. And then the folks that are on what we would call the ministry side would have the chance to make those things happen without a lot of the back and forth that we've been doing so far. So that's sort of what we've been talking about with Dawn, and here's what we started with. The board and a lot of the leadership have read this book. It's called Governance and Ministry, and it's by Dan Hotchkiss. And for those of you who are policy wonks, there are extra copies of this in the library. I highly recommend that you read it. And a lot of what we're doing now has been recommended by this book. So this book is what recommended the Governance Task Force, and that's why we started. Our goal with the governance task force is to look at what other congregations do, look at what congregations do that are our size and want to go to the places we want to go to, and come up with some examples and give those examples to the board. Our goal is to also engage with the congregation itself, see what it is that people are interested in, concerned about, curious about, and share some of the ideas that we have in order to change the structure of the governance. There's no decisions that have been made at this point. Right now, we are in a process of studying. And another role would be to look at what policies we have, what are working for us, can we improve our policies, can we make our policies clearer so that people are free to make decisions based on policy without having to necessarily go person to person asking different sorts of things. And so what we're doing now is studying what our governance structure could look like. It's actually really fun, which might sound kind of strange to those of you who are not interested in policy governance. We've been having a pretty good time doing that. So the process that's mentioned in this book is a 3-year process, and that might actually end up being 3 separate task forces. We are the task force for the first year, and that is the year of looking at our policies, deciding whether any of those need to be rewritten, making some suggestions for how the governance structure would look like if we change the governance structure, what are the pluses and minuses of doing that, and then presenting that to the congregation, hopefully, if our timing works out well, at the June meeting so that you can see what it is that we're recommending. I know that maybe doesn't give a whole lot of detail. I don't want to spend too much of your time, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, there's a lot of detail in the book if you'd like to read it or even just skim through it. I think it's really, really interesting. But are there any questions right now?
Do you anticipate making a recommendation that we would need to vote on in June? What are we headed for June?
That's a very good question, and I think I'm not sure that I know what the answer to that is yet. I mean, eventually, yes, there would be votes because there would be changes in bylaws. For example, we might have a smaller board, and there would be some changes in bylaws on that. I don't know about June, if that's where it's going to be happening. It is a long process, yeah. So, and just to give an example, for those of you who are committee chairs, every single month you write a report to the board, and then that goes into a packet, and then the board reads that packet. For those of you who haven't sat on the board before, that board packet is anywhere from 40 to 70 pages long every month that we read. And wouldn't it be amazing if you were a committee chair and you didn't have to write a report necessarily, if you could just get your work done without having to do all the paperwork. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Or not do it as often, yeah. And so that's one of the things we're looking at in order to make the time we spend here much more valuable from a spiritually nurturing standpoint, but also from an efficiency standpoint and helping other people. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm really excited about the work that these 3 task forces are doing. It's just amazing, and it's going to have reverberations into the future that are really exciting. These changes that we want to make take a lot of money, and they also take a lot of love from the members of this church. And to that end, I would like to introduce the unmitigated worldwide ambassador of love, Bob Day.
Gee, Hal, that is exactly what I was thinking, and I'm just going to read a little bit from hymn 289 that we sang this morning about creative love. Creative love, our thanks we give, that this, our world, is incomplete, that struggle greets our will to live, that work awaits our hands and feet. Ooh. That just puts it right there in perspective, doesn't it? So there is a stewardship report in your packet, and I am happy to report we have a couple of amendments to it. the first paragraph of my stewardship report is thank you all for making pledges and paying them. As Steve said, we are at 100% year-to-date on pledges, so. So exciting. The board set several goals for the stewardship drive this year. It will be taking place in March 1st, and the goals are all listed in the report. A couple of things I want to mention. The first goal was paying all staff at midpoint of the UUA compensation guidelines. Really, it's not exactly, that's what we use to do some preliminary calculations. Some people are going to be above midpoint, some people are going to be below midpoint, some are going to be right at midpoint. It's a complicated thing depending on who they are and how long they've been here and all that stuff. So I just want to clarify that one thing. The other thing is the board and the Building Our Future Task Force agreed to hire Barry Finkelstein, who came in October, to help us with our annual campaign this year, in addition to the capital campaign next year. He was here in October about the capital campaign, but he's helping us on the Stewardship Committee with the annual campaign. And Barry's big recommendation is that we have what's called an every member campaign. And that means you won't be able to pledge online this year. You won't be able to come to the social area and get your packet and fill out a pledge form this year. You're going to get to meet with one of your closest personal friends, one-on-one, or maybe two-on-one, or four-on-one, however that family thing works for you, including children, 10 years or older. And we need about 40 to 50 visiting stewards who are the people, visiting stewards are trained by Barry on February 9th. We may need to look at February the 9th. I'm seeing 3 things now on February the 9th. But anyway, Barry is coming into town to do the training, one on after church on Sunday, February 9th, one on Monday morning at 10, and then one on Monday evening at 6. And so people will be trained. The assignment will be speak to 4 other families. And as Ibba Surface said so eloquently last week, it is a lot of fun. All you people who think you're introverts, you do talk to people. And it's fun, right? Do I hear an amen? Denise is saying amen back there. Okay, all right. So if you have not already been contacted by someone on the Stewardship Committee to be a visiting steward, guess what I have? Yeah, right here, a sign-up sheet. You can see me afterwards. Pick one of the training sessions, and then we will meet with Gail and do assignments. We're going to do assignments pretty much by zip code this year, unless there's some other overriding reason. That way it'll make it easy for you to meet with your 4 other pledge units. And if you can't do 4 for whatever reason, and you can do 2, Jacob and Sharon, that's fine. We're flexible, because you're going to do 2 each, and that amounts to 4. Oh, no, it's not a sales call, Hal. You know, it's all about the love, Hal. Yeah. It's about making connections and talking about your dreams and visions for the church. Did I mention that the stewardship campaign theme for this year is 2020 Vision? And yes, we will be having little 2020 glasses on Stewardship Kickoff Sunday. So it's not a sales call, it's getting to know each other. Getting to know each other. Chris Hagan, are you in the room? I called on Chris whenever she was a new member, and now we know each other. You know, she smiles at me every time I walk through that door. That's great. So please, 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 either volunteer to be a steward or agree to meet with your steward. You have to meet with a steward. It doesn't have to be in your house. Can be. It's more fun. You don't have to go anywhere, but it's up to you. And meet with the steward. Answer the phone call, the email, the text, whatever it is, however you get contacted, please, please do not ignore it. It's one of the most frustrating things in the world for visiting stewards to be ignored. Just like it's frustrating for you to be ignored, right? You want to be heard, so this is your opportunity to be heard. A couple of other details. I'm going to take a deep breath here. The current amount of pledges pledged in this year's budget is just a tad over $600,000. And Barry recommends having 3 goal budgets: good, better, and best. The good pledge goal is $685,000. So that's about an $80,000 increase over where we are today. That's the good one. My report says the best would be $750,000. I'm happy to report that the Finance Committee met yesterday and we've reduced it to only $734,000. And then the better goal in between has been reduced from $720,000 to only $712,000. Please meet with your stewards. It just boggles my mind to think we're going to have an $80,000 increase. Because last year the goal was $650,000 and we came in at $596,000, and then we have added some mid-year pledges to get us over $600,000. It's going to take a lot. Where was that hymn? The struggle. Yeah. Yeah. So, any questions? Feel the love. Remember, feel the love. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. One of my personal beliefs is that movies and meetings should not be longer than 90 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. We've got one more speaker. Laurie Samuels is going to talk about the Endowment Trust. Is Laurie here? Oh, there you are. I'm glad you're here.
I'm here. I'm a super introvert. I will not be visiting people's houses, but we will say yes. And because of this, I wrote everything out as 4 minutes. So I'm very happy to be here representing the trustees of the Congregation's Endowment Trust. We're an elected committee of 5 people, and I'd like to start out by introducing the other 4 trustees. As you know, Vicki Tatarin is out of town, but would the other trustees stand? Got Candy Toller, Linda Dorico, and our newest member, Gaines Mann. Thank you all. I know there might be some people in the room who didn't know that the church had an endowment fund or aren't exactly sure what it is. And I'll give you a little background in a minute, but I'd like to start out with our biggest news. We have money to give away. To be specific, we have about $28,000 to give the congregation this year. In keeping with our distribution policy, we will give 2/5 of that amount, or about $11,000, to the board for use in capital improvement projects or capital reserves. The rest of the money, a little less than $17,000, we will be able to give to the congregation in the form of grants. I'll come back to the grants, but first I just want to say, wow, $28,000 is a lot of money. How is it that we have this much money to give away? Well, it's because of many of you, and because of people who are no longer with us in this room, but who wanted to keep supporting our congregation after their death. All of the money in the Endowment Trust comes from 2 sources. You can give to the trust at any time in memory of someone who has died, or in honor of a person or an occasion, or just because you want to. We are grateful that in 2019 we received $825 in gifts of this type. The other way you can give to the trust is after your death, but you need to plan ahead for this one. You can leave money to the church in your will, or make the church a beneficiary of a life insurance policy or a retirement account, or let your family and our clergy know that it would mean a lot to you if people made donations to the church in your memory. If you have made any of these plans, you are a member of our congregation's Legacy Circle, a group that has upwards of 70 members. I know a lot of Legacy Circle members are in the room now. Thank you. And if you have made any of these plans but haven't told us, please let us know. As trustees, we're responsible for investing the money that people give to the trust, and then, as the investments grow, giving a certain percentage of the fund's value back to the congregation every year. And this brings me back to the grants. Through grants, the Endowment Trust has been able to fund many valuable projects that serve the congregation's mission but fall outside the regular operating budget. Last year, we provided a grant to the Building for Our Future task force to cover the first portion of the fees for the capital campaign consultant. The year before, we provided funds for the architectural massing plan, as well as to the Social Justice Committee for new mattresses for our room in the inn guests. This year, because our congregation is in the midst of 3 big transitions, we will give first consideration to projects that are in line with the board's priorities. If you are interested in applying for a grant, please let one of the trustees know, or send an email to me directly or to trust@thefuun.org so that we can send you the application guidelines. The guidelines are also available in the church's online archive, but if you're not familiar with the system, they can be a little hard to find. The application deadline is March 31st, but we encourage everyone to get in touch with us well before then so that we can help you make your application as strong as possible. In closing, I will say that it has been a privilege to serve with the other trustees, and that any of us would be very happy to talk with you anytime about grant ideas or about ways you can continue supporting the congregation from the great beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. At this time, if you would extinguish the chalice, and Gail will give us our closing words, and then I have one more thing to say.
Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. Whatever form we are, able or disabled, rich or poor, is not how much we do, but how much love we put into the doing. A lifelong sharing of love with others.
I just want to end saying blessings, blessing on your courage, your imagination, your vision, your love, your ability to collaborate and share ministry with one another. Blessed be.
And I would like to thank everyone for coming here today, for participating, especially those of you who spoke today and serve on these committees and these task forces and the other 200 volunteer positions that we have in this church. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for all the love. Meeting adjourned.